outlaws.
These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
War Room presents Rebels, Rogues, and Outlaws.
You set out to take Vienna! Take Vienna!
The national bestseller by longtime Bannon producer Dan Fluette. Take a journey through the pictorial history of War Room. In a culture that celebrates the weak, show your support by standing with the rebels. Go to doitfluette.com or scan the QR code on your screen. Use the code RAV20 for 20% off your order. Stand with the rebels and never back down.
Happens when the fourth turning meets fifth generation warfare.
A commentator, international social media sensation, and former Navy intelligence veteran.
This is Human Events with your host, Jack Posobiec.
Christ is king.
The jury has now reached a full verdict in the racketeering and sex trafficking trial of music mogul Sean Diddy Combs.
Sean Combs has been found not guilty of racketeering conspiracy, not guilty of sex trafficking Cassandra Ventura, but he has been found guilty on 2 counts of transportation for the purposes of prostitution, not guilty of sex trafficking his former girlfriend who testified under the pseudonym Jane.
Paramount Global and CBS have agreed today to pay President Donald Trump a sum that
I rise with the intention of disrupting the normal business of the United States Senate for as long as I am physically able.
Today, I'm proud to announce that the Department of Justice has unsealed federal charges against another Tesla attacker.
Thousands of federal
to the House, where it faces an uphill battle after the Senate changes.
President Trump has said on Tuesday that Israel has agreed to terms for a 60-day ceasefire in Gaza.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition of Human Events Daily. We are here live, Washington, D.C. Today is July 2nd, 2025, Anno Domini, just a few days away from America's 249th birthday. Also heard that earlier on War Room, Ambassador Monica Crowley was saying that we might even get a flyover of the B-2 bombers here in Washington, D.C. And so I was thinking, I wasn't planning on going downtown for the, going out for the 4th of July celebration. And then I heard about those B-2s and I said, might have to bring Tanya and the kids for that one, because B-2 bombers flying over to Washington, D.C. is not exactly something you see every day. But one thing that we do see every day here in Washington, of course, is legislation. And so the big, beautiful bill. And here's something I want to say that about the big, beautiful bill. People are coming out and say, oh, but Jack, it doesn't address this and it doesn't address that. And why isn't this thing in there? And I really, really want that thing. Guys, slow down. Slow down. What is this bill about? All right. The big, beautiful bill. It is about a couple of things, but it is not about other things. Main quest versus side quest. That's what we've been talking about all week here. It reduces taxes. So tax breaks, yes, across the board. Also tax breaks for the no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. The no tax on Social Security, that's going to come in something else. But what else does it do? And what are the libs losing their minds about? Massive increases in the budget for ICE. We're talking a potential, more than doubling, a supersizing. You're going to supersize ICE with this bill, with the budget going from $2 billion all the way up, ramped up to $45 billion. If you want mass deportations, if you want the ability to actually get these illegals off the streets, this is it. This is the bill. You're not going to get a better one. You just aren't. And this idea that you're going to override the parliament, it can only pass by 50 votes. Okay, so you don't have the votes to do anything else. For all these people who say, well, I wish the government could do that. Guys, there's two types of people in this world. People who sit around and wish for things that could happen, and those of us that actually do things that can happen. And that's what this bill is about. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. The way no bill is ever going to be perfect. But is it better than any other immigration bill that we've seen in modern history? Yes, it absolutely is, because it focuses on the main quest, the mass deportation of illegal aliens from the United States of America. The greatest foreign threat to America is the one that's already here, the tens of millions of illegals. We'll be right back. Roger Stone, join us next.
What America First truly means.
Welcome to the Second American Revolution.
All right, Jack Posobiec, here we are back live once again on Human Events Daily in Washington, D.C. on the Real America's Voice Network. Folks, right now you can go to patriotmobile.com/POSO or call 972-PATRIOT to get a free month of free service with your promo code POSO. Look, we understand that in the mainstream tech space, there's a lot of options. There's a lot of cell phone providers out there. But when it comes down to it, when it comes to this service, you want service that you know the dollars that you are spending every month to stay in touch with your loved ones, to stay in touch with your family, to stay in touch with your friends, and of course, to listen to Human Events Daily and stay in touch with the world. You want to make sure that those dollars are also going to the best possible use. You know what those other companies are funding, and that's not people, or those aren't issues that align with your values. They don't stand for freedom. They don't celebrate the 4th of July the way we do. They don't stand for our veterans. They don't stand for first responders, and they certainly don't stand for the right to life. You know who does? Patriot Mobile. And so that's why you've got to go to patriotmobile.com/POSO. Again, this incredible offer, a free month of service. Where else are you going to get that? With promo code POSO. Again, patriotmobile.com/POSO, patriotmobile.com/POSO. All right, folks. So we're now locked in with the spending bill, this new big beautiful bill that's going forward. And I've talked to people, and one of the things that I see people say, they're griping. They say, "Oh, this bill isn't here, it isn't there. Why don't we have this? Why don't we have that?" I don't hear enough people focusing on the incredible things that are in the bill, the tax cuts, and this massive focus on one of President Trump's central issues, perhaps his most seminal issue among all, illegal immigration. This is the president's domestic policy agenda wrapped up into one bill. And so I wanted to bring on now veteran Republican strategist Roger Stone to weigh in on this bill, on the president's domestic agenda, and sort of some of these questions that are coming up I think, from those who wish that there were other things in the bill. Roger joins us now. Roger, how are you?
Jack, great to be with you. You're absolutely right, though. There's a huge amount of disinformation about the big, beautiful bill. First of all, let's be clear. This is the continuation of the largest single across-the-board tax cut on the American people in U.S. history. And the left continues to lie and say, well, including the Congressional Budget Office, which is, by the way, always wrong. They claim that this would actually increase the deficit. In truth, every time we have had a federal income tax cut, whether it was under Donald Trump in 2017, whether it was under Ronald Reagan, whether it was under Jack Kennedy, there's actually always been a sharp spike in federal revenues. The deficit problem is caused by excess spending. And spending, this is not the place to address spending. Spending needs to be addressed in a series of rescission bills, the first of which the administration has already sent to the Congress. So to oppose the big, beautiful bill, and if the big, beautiful bill were to fail, the American people would get an immediate 68% federal income tax increase across the board. Obviously, the no tax on tips is also included in the bill. And then there's some confusion about Social Security. The truth is that this bill would have a tax cut for 88% of Social Security recipients. So those who say the bill doesn't eliminate the tax for Social Security recipients, that was structurally not possible because of a procedural rule, but 88% of the people will get a cut. You're reading directly through the bill includes a $4,000 above-the-line deduction for individuals 65 and older, applicable for years 25 through 28. This reduces taxable income for Social Security recipients, lowering or eliminating federal income taxes on their benefits for as many as 88% of current Social Security recipients. Again, which party moved Social Security funds from a private trust to public funds so the Congress could squander it? That would be the Democrats. Which party stopped tax deductions for Social Security payments? Well, that was the Democrats. Which party started the taxing of Social Security payments? That would be the Democrats. Which party started to give Social Security benefits to illegal immigrants who never paid into the Social Security Trust Fund? That would be the Democrats. Which party has not actually fostered a Social Security increase in the 8 years they were in power? That would be a Democrat. And then, Jack, I'm sure you remember this, Joe Biden tried to take credit for Social Security benefits being adjusted for the cost of living, when in fact that was done by President Richard Milhouse Nixon, who in 1972 signed a bill that introduced automatic cost of living adjustments, COLAs, for Social Security benefits, which began in 1975. Those adjustments tied benefit increases to inflation as measured by the Consumer Price Index, the CPI. So Richard Nixon has done more for these people than Democrats.
And Roger, to those out there, and I've been crunching some of the numbers as well on X and on my show, who say, oh, well, it does this and it does that. One of the things that I see people missing as well in the conversation is that this puts a huge focus on President Trump's central issue of illegal immigration, finally giving ICE the funding and the budget and all of the runway that they're going to need to conduct these operations because of the invasion, the mass invasion that occurred under Joe Biden, this mess that he has to clean up. But as it turns out, cleaning up messes don't come for free. But also, this is a budget that would be given to ICE in a way that we just haven't seen in any other administration. This is the central issue President Trump has been talking about for 10 years. And I think it's a real key to his domestic policy agenda, which is going to be his legacy as much as the foreign policy is.
Look, I'm in total agreement. I mean, in all honesty, one of the fastest ways you can get the deficit down if you're concerned about spending and the deficit is by deporting 20 million illegals, many of whom are illegally receiving Social Security benefits, but many others are staying in, I don't know, $500 a night hotel rooms. The cost, in many cases, state laws require you to provide social services for these illegals. One of the single greatest savings could be to deport those who are here illegally. I think a lot of people miss that.
Well, they do miss that because obviously, look, we know that the federal outlays of these programs are so high, and because it's done exponentially out across the system, and people say, oh, they can't, illegal aliens can't access those funds, and Posobiec, you're making it up again. And I say, wait a minute, no. We understand they are able to access them through family members, through anchor babies, through a variety of systems that are available to them. Again, it's very economically lucrative to come to the United States as an illegal alien, and were it not, they would not be here. These are economic migrants, and these policies also play the most significant role of America's debt and America's deficit. So, should you wish to reduce that, all you have to do is, instead of reducing the supply for it, as we've seen, cut the prices, cut the cost. Obviously, a politically fraught move. There's no question. But you can also reduce the demand by coming in and saying, what if the people who are on these rolls were no longer enrolled in the programs because they've been deported from the country? Last minute to you, Roger Stone.
Jack, you're absolutely right. There's one other important aspect here. The Big Beautiful Bill also includes the funding for the Golden Dome. This is the Strategic Defense Initiative. Also, it is essentially the same technology that Israel has used to protect itself from incoming ICBM missiles. It worked extremely well when the Iranians launched a recent attack on a U.S. base in Qatar. Not a single one of their missiles got through. We need to build this in the United States. Biden was dragging his feet on it, but the funding for a Golden Dome to protect our country from incoming missiles also in the Big Beautiful Bill. Absolutely
Roger, this
crucial.
is so important.
Some of you and I supported all the way back to the days of Ronald Reagan. Well, you were very young, but I was supporting Ronald Reagan.
Roger, we know that the Patriot missiles are something President Trump has talked about. Let's hold you over.
Today, they talk about influencers. These are influencers, and they're friends of mine. Jack Posobiec. Where's Jack? Jack, he's done a great job.
All right, Jack Posobiec, here we are back live, Human Events Daily, Washington, D.C. We're on with veteran Republican strategist Roger Stone. Roger, you and I were just chatting about the big, beautiful bill, and really, this is the president's domestic agenda. This is everything that he's fought for, that he campaigned for on the trail, and it's what the American people voted for. Let me ask you this before we end the discussion on that. Do you think that it will ultimately pass and be on his desk by America's birthday this Friday?
I'm not head counting, to be honest with you. I'm very hopeful that is the case. Look, like many people, there are parts of this that I don't like. No one ever claimed it was perfect, particularly these provisions that have to do with a 10-year hiatus on states being able to regulate artificial intelligence. As someone who's been a victim of an enormous amount of artificial intelligence, you can see all kinds of videos online of me saying things that I never actually said. I do think this has to be regulated, and I don't like that portion of the bill. Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think, is doing a very good job of trying to make sure that it gets stripped out when it goes back to the House. There are some minor things here that many of us don't like. No one ever claimed it was perfect, but the tax cuts, the funding for ICE, the funding for the Golden Dome Strategic Defense Initiative, the funding, or I should say, the reduction of taxes for 88% of Social Security beneficiaries, all of those things are well worth it, and the rest can be ironed out. Now, yes, we need to cut spending more, but this is not really the vehicle to do it. Although, frankly, federal costs are going to come down very dramatically if we deport many of the people who are here illegally, who we are illegally or illicitly paying benefits for.
I think it's exactly right. And I think it absolutely needs to pass. And I think that, and by the way, a number of these things can be addressed in further legislation. We know there's going to be an NDAA. We know there's going to be other bills, this rescission bill that's going to be coming forward. So certainly a number of these things can be addressed moving forward. Roger, there was some really big news that's come out over the past couple of days. President Trump is increasing his pressure on Jerome Powell. He's talking about the rate being so much higher than it should be, interest rates, the fact that he won't lower them down. And actually, as it's just breaking now, there's some new news coming forward regarding Jerome Powell and some of his plans over at the Federal Reserve. Can you give us an update?
Yeah, Jack, you're exactly right. I mean, Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve were anxious to cut rates in the fall before the last election when the inflation rate was actually higher than it is today. So the idea that they won't cut rates now because they're concerned about inflation is a bogus argument. They were willing to cut rates to try to help Joe Biden get reelected. Of course, that didn't work out so well. Now, by the two measures that the Fed uses, the employment rate and the inflation rate, both of which were significantly lower the last time they cut cut interest rates, would indicate that we need a rate cut. In the meantime, however, Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Fed, testified to Congress about the $2.4 billion renovation of the palatial headquarters of the Federal Reserve in Washington, D.C. He specifically said to Congress that this renovation does not include private elevators to be used by the governors of the Federal Reserve, did not include a private dining room to be used by the governors, did not provide for a roof garden with a panoramic view of Washington, D.C. Yet we now learned that the plan that they have approved, the $2.4 billion plan they approved includes all of those things, which means that Jerome Powell lied under oath to Congress, and he lied about something material that involves the taxpayers. I was accused of lying to Congress, but I had no motive to lie. No misstatement I made to Congress covered up any underlying crime, nor was it relevant or material. It's a very different situation here. So Bill Pulte, who is the head of the Federal Home Finance Agency, the guy who uncovered the 22-year crime spree of mortgage fraud by New York Attorney General Letitia James, has now called for a congressional investigation into whether Powell lied to Congress. But also, frankly, I think the Congress needs to subpoena Jerome Powell's text messages and his emails to look for political motive in his decision not to cut interest rates now on the American people.
Well, and this is something that whether you've got home loans, and particularly, Roger, for those Americans who are attempting to secure their first home, to secure a new home, these first-time home buyers who obviously are a kind of a political jump ball right now. President Trump won so many of them in 2024, but now others are suddenly, especially in places like New York City, are being seduced by members of the far left because they realize this is creating a massive issue and massive tension for these voters. I mean, you don't believe that Jerome Powell is doing this to play politics, do you, Roger?
I think it's kind of obvious that he did. He was anxious to cut rates to try to help Joe Biden get reelected. We're now seeing something we've never seen before, Jack, where a number of the governors of the Fed are unhappy. They realize that it's time to cut rates so that people can buy a new car or so people can buy a new home. It would be an enormous shot in the arm for this economy. So what Jerome Powell is trying to do here is stop the coming Trump boom. I mean, look at across the board. USAID has been defunded. The Dow is skyrocketing. These rogue left-wing judges' power is being limited. We have stifled, at a minimum, the nuclear capability of the Iranians. Zoran Mamdani is rising as the head of the Democrat Party, the face of the Democrat Party, an out-and-out communist. The RNC has 5 times more cash on hand than the DNC, who may have to go borrow to stay in business. Criminal illegals are being deported, and the courts have finally been pushed out of the way because the president has the authority to do that. States are beginning to defund Planned Parenthood. 128 Democrats voted against impeaching President Trump last week. And white males like David Hogg are being thrown out of the Democrat Party. I mean, this is the best week of my life. Never mind Donald Trump's life.
Roger, you have to admit it certainly is a banner week. And of course, next week we'll all be together at the Turning Point Student Action Summit over in Tampa, Florida. And I'm excited to see you there, Roger.
Look forward to it, Jack. God bless you. It's going to be a great, great weekend.
It will be great. Go to SAS2025.com. Use promo code POST. So you'll see myself, you'll see Roger, so many people, Tucker Carlson, who are coming in, bringing Tanya and the boys today, and maybe even the founder of the Gulf of America, my brother, Jack Posobiec, will be there. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Savannah Hernandez on Real America's Voice, Human Events Daily.
Welcome back to this Real America's Voice news break. I'm Terrence Bates. We appreciate you being here with us. The House is debating the Senate's version of the One Big Beautiful Bill as the clock ticks down towards the July 4th deadline to get that tax and spending plan passed and on President Trump's desk. In fact, earlier this morning, President Trump meeting with some outlying Republicans in the House trying to convince them to vote for the bill. That vote is expected to happen as soon as today. Procedural votes have already happened.
The yeas are 50, the nays are 50. The Senate being evenly divided, the Vice President votes in the affirmative. The bill as amended is passed.
As you just heard, the measure passed in the Senate on Tuesday with Vice President J.D. Vance casting the tie-breaking vote to get the measure over the finish line. Republican Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski voted for the measure, but she warns the House, quote, "My hope is that the House is going to look at this and recognize that we're not there yet." Meantime, House Speaker Mike Johnson appears confident that the One Big Beautiful Bill will in fact soon become law.
We're estimating the average American will have an additional $10,000 take-home pay because of this. You will have no taxes on your tips and on your overtime. Seniors will get a reduction in taxes because of a credit they'll have, those on Social Security. There's something in this bill, literally, as the president said today, for everyone. It is great policy and is going to help the economy, help the American people, and fulfill the promises of the America First agenda.
And just moments ago, Speaker Johnson saying that progress is being made towards passing the One Big Beautiful Bill, but also acknowledging that not everyone is going to be 100% happy. President Trump raising the prospect of a 60-day ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. He brought it up Tuesday in a social media post saying that Israel had agreed to a deal to stop fighting. Hamas is reportedly saying it's open to reaching an agreement, but any initiative must...
And Jack, where's Jack? Where's Jack? Where is he? Jack, I want to see you. Great job, Jack. Thank you. What a job you do. You know, we have an incredible thing. We're always talking about the fake news and the bad, but we have guys, and these are the guys who should be getting Pulitzers.
This is Savannah Hernandez standing in front of the now closed Roosevelt Hotel, and if you guys remember this area, this was truly the epicenter of the illegal immigration crisis in New York since 2022. Now, a lot of people are celebrating that these hotels are finally shut down, but the reality of the matter is that migrants are simply being moved into federally funded homeless shelters throughout New York at this point. Now, the city of New York just signed a $1 billion contract for emergency shelter services throughout New York. And as of January of this year, Adams himself stated that around 51,000 illegal immigrants were still utilizing city shelter services. And the contract that they just signed was for the 86,000 people that are still experiencing homelessness in New York. And that includes, of course, New Yorkers and illegal immigrants. Now, something interesting that's going on as well. The Department of Homeless Services is actually instructing their employees not to cooperate with ICE at all. They're stating not to tell ICE or law enforcement officials the immigration status of anybody in the homeless shelter system. On top of that, they're stating that an ICE detainer is not even enough to allow access into homeless facilities throughout New York. So this is one of the ways that illegal immigrants are still being sheltered in this city.
All right, this is Jack Posobiec. Here we are, Washington, D.C. You're seeing a sweeping shot now of the White House. But that was Savannah Hernandez talking about this insane giveaway to illegal aliens that has led to the shutdown of the Roosevelt Hotel. Savannah joins us now. Sav, walk us through this situation. And for those of us who don't have any context, I mean, this has been going on for years in the city of New York.
Oh, absolutely, Jack. And the Roosevelt Hotel, just for people who are not familiar, was one of the biggest processing centers for illegal immigrants in New York. This is one of the areas where they were giving out free plane tickets for illegal immigrants who came into the city. For example, this is actually the same shelter that Jose Ibarra, the illegal immigrant who murdered Laken Riley, this is where he got his plane ticket to go from New York City to Georgia to go and commit that horrific crime. So that's Roosevelt Hotel. Now, it just closed down, and Eric Adams has been promising to close down migrant shelters throughout New York. And of course, he's been stating that the migrant crisis, thanks to the Trump administration, of course, has slowed down. But there are still tens of thousands of illegal immigrants that are currently residing in that area. So what's happening right now is, instead of sheltering them in the Roosevelt Hotel, which, by the way, is owned by the Pakistan government, or the government of Pakistan, the city of New York was paying them $220 million to house illegal immigrants since 2022 in this shelter. That in itself is an insane caveat to this story. But the Roosevelt Hotel now shut down. However, these migrants are simply being hidden in plain sight and being pushed into the homeless shelters in New York, which, by the way, are partially federally funded. And what's happening is the Department of Homeless Services is, of course, telling their employees, you cannot cooperate with ICE. A ICE detainer is not enough to allow ICE into facilities. If ICE is coming to make an arrest simply for immigration-related purposes, you cannot allow them into the facility. You cannot tell ICE the facility addresses where illegal immigrants are currently residing. So this is the situation that's currently happening in New York, and quite frankly, in the blue cities across the United States of America. And this is where the illegal immigration fight is currently at. So I went up that way because the closure of the Roosevelt Hotel is in essence, a huge win, right? Because it does show us that we are making good strides in the right direction in terms of illegal immigration. However, Democrats are now working overtime to simply hide illegal immigrants and continue providing them with free hotel rooms on the taxpayer dime.
And what's incredible, too, is that, so this is the same city, and man, we've been talking about New York a lot lately, from Luigi Maggioni to the massive illegal alien crisis, to now Zoran Mamdani becomes this socialist, and a guy, by the way, who is an avowed socialist, but who we all know that you scratch a socialist and you find a communist right under. And somebody was telling me that one of the cable news networks was trying to say, well, socialism just means everything's free, and socialism just means that you get free stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh. The cable news guys, they don't understand. Socialism doesn't mean that. Socialism means tearing down groups of people who they have targeted and uplifting their friends and uplifting abject criminals and letting them loose among society. Sab, why is it that people are still buying this kind of stuff? What's crazy to me, though, is when you're talking about these issues, they say, well, okay, well, there's all these issues with rent. There's issues with pricing in New York. There's issues with the congestion, et cetera. People don't like the new taxes. You have all of those laws because of Democrats and liberal policies. That's why they exist. And yet, for some reason, they think that the answer is to go further to the left.
You know, Jack, I've done a lot of reporting on New York, and what I've realized about New York is there's two classes of people that are going to be voting for Zoran Mamdani. The first class is Nepo babies and the kids of rich people, right? The kids who never actually had to go work, who've never had to go work for anything in their life. These are the same exact people that are attending these anti-ICE protests and stopping mothers from going to work. This is another, instance that I captured earlier this month. Those are Zoran Mamdani's supporters. They're rich kids who have no idea idea how the economy works, have no idea how a business works, have no idea how anything works, and just like the idea of, oh, you know what, this is how we are going to virtue signal. We're going to vote in socialism because, this is how we can help society by voting in somebody who's going to give everybody everything for free, just like our parents gave to us. They have no idea how hard work works or the economy works, like I just stated. So that's class one of the people who support Zoran. Class two, what I'm realizing is, of course, the first generation children of immigrants who come to the United States of America, or quite frankly, illegal immigrants who may or may not be voting in New York's elections come November, because we all know that they have very lax voting laws over there. Illegal immigrants all have access to Real ID NYC, which of course is the government issued ID that illegal immigrants can have up that way. So these are kind of the two patterns that I've noticed, right? It's either rich kids who have no idea how things work, or it is the illegal immigrants or children, first generation children of immigrants who, again, have no loyalty to the United States of America, have no loyalty to our culture, our country, our foundations, that are pushing these horrific third world ideals into the United States of America, and supporting somebody like Zoran Mamdani because, and I quote, hey, this person's like my parents. He's not from the United States of America, and that's okay. We don't like the culture of the United States of America, so we want to vote somebody in who is going to dismantle the West and target and attack whiter, richer neighborhoods. So those are the two classes that have really stood out to me, Jack.
And no, I think you're right. The way that I've been describing this since the election is it's new New York versus old New York. And so old New York, this is, and because people were, kind of responding to my arguments that mass immigration plays a huge role here. And they said, well, hold on, Jack, but, blacks and Hispanics voted more for Cuomo than they did for Mamdani. I said, but that's entirely my point. Right. That's exactly what I'm saying, that when you have these recent immigrants who and their children, the first generation, then vote, they're coming from places, particularly in New York. They've seen a massive threefold skyrocketing explosion of South Asian and Middle Eastern immigrants to the New York metro area. And Mamdani won them by 80%. He won them 80-20. And that is simply an irrevocable truth. It is just absolutely true. He wins those, and then he wins this other block, as you say. And it's amazing, too, because when we wrote this massive treatise on the history of communism last year, which I believe the 1-year anniversary will be Monday. I have to do something about that. Talking about all of these trends, we've always pointed out and identified that something that Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks realized. This is the difference between Leninism and pure communism. What they identified was, and we write about this in On Humans, was that the working class never seems to actually just rise up on their own to revolt. And so, of course, Marx famously ends the Communist Manifesto with "Workers of the world unite." But as it turns out, the working class don't really go in for all of this revolutionary nonsense because they're spending more time just working. They have jobs, they work. They're not interested in any of these mass movements. But typically, the sorts of people that really form the core of these revolutionary movements, and of course, the Russian Revolution being the first pure Marxist revolution, was Leninism. And here's the difference between Leninism and Marxism, which, gosh, I'd love if the cable news guys would understand this. And Sav, I think you'll get what I'm coming at here when I say this. The difference is because Lenin realized that you need a core of urban elitists who can then come and lead the proletariat to that greater revolution, because they can't do so on their own. You need an educated, young, urban core to be the vanguard of the revolution. And this is where that phrase vanguard of the revolution comes from. And also the vanguard of the proletariat, who are not actually members of the proletariat themselves. Well, these are members of the bourgeoisie, right? They are the sons and daughters of the rich who, for whatever reason, whether it be lazy, whether it be recent immigration status, in this case, whether it be just not having gone through that rite of passage of having like a summer job that kind of sucks, but you have to put in that time to be able to go through your adulthood phase. They don't really have any of that. They never had any of that. And so what do they go for? They go for these mass movements. And Lenin realized that if he was able to do that among the urban cores of Russia during the Russian Empire period, that he would be able to push for this mass revolution. I don't know, Sav, does that sound like a little familiar to you, but just in a little way?
Maybe a little bit. Maybe we're seeing, history repeat itself in New York, which is probably why we don't teach, American children about the history of communism, which is why our entire education system has become subverted. And that's essentially what we are seeing in the modern day, right, Jack? It's subversion and invasion that has led the United States of America to where we are right now, where Zohran Mamdani is campaigning on open socialism, and the people of New York are clapping their hands and saying that this is a great thing. You really have to, like you were stating, look at the class of people that is supporting this, because it's not the people who, quite frankly, are educated well, but were educated by a system that was subverted by potentially, foreign adversaries, or even people who just straight up hate Western culture, hate the United States of America. And, this has been a really interesting talking point that a lot of people have been bringing up, but it's how legal immigration has also impacted the culture of the United States of America. And this is an example as to how. So I think it's important that we keep talking about these issues, because the United States does have our own culture, and we need to preserve it, and we need to preserve the West. And again, this is one example.
Sav, we got a quick break. Let me hold that point, because this is a fantastic point. It's so important, and this coalition of the fringes that the Leninists are putting together again must be defeated. Be right back.
said Gen Z would stay silent, that we'd back down, that we'd forget what's worth fighting for. But this generation remembers. We remember truth. We remember freedom. And now, we rise. This is more than a conference. It's a call to action, to reclaim the future, to ignite a movement that cannot be ignored. Student Action Summit 2025, featuring the boldest voices in the fight. Charlie Kirk, Secretary Pete Hegseth, Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Brett Cooper, Secretary Kristi Noem, Riley Gaines, Brandon Tatum, Jack Posobiec, Laura Ingraham, Megyn Kelly, Greg Gutfeld, Tom Homan, Congressman Byron Donalds, Russell Brand, Savannah Chrisley. Join thousands of students, future leaders, and freedom fighters. This is the battleground of ideas. This is the Student Action Summit. Register now at SAS2025.com.
When I'm working long hours, I'm always listening to Human Events with Jack Posobiec.
All right, Jack Posobiec, we're back live here with Savannah Hernandez, and we were talking about all of these massive changes, the massive crimes and fraud that New York City is perpetuating on its own citizens, and also these massive upheavals in New York City, and how this really isn't a leading indicator for where we're going as a nation. This is our greatest city, by the way. And by the way, I say that as a Philly guy, so I mean, it's like, you know, I gotta throw it out there. Of course, my Philly family, of course, will I'm sure be correcting me in the family chat after the show, the way they always do. But Sav, right before we left, we were talking about how, look, it's the 4th of July coming up on Friday. This is the birthday of the United States of America, 249 years since independence, since the founding of the nation. Also, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, gotta say, just throwing it out there. But we also live at a time where people are trying to change what it means to be an American. People are trying to, make it so that there's the way that we just described, new New York and old New York. Well, they want new America versus old America, don't they?
Oh, absolutely, Jack. And this is something that I have been really researching and looking into. It's what our founding fathers stated about assimilation, what they were wanting for our country, what our foundations were supposed to be. And one of their main things that they consistently focused in on was, of course, assimilation. Now, this is something that we have been screaming about for the past decade because we consistently see this pattern of, either illegal immigrants or sometimes even immigrants coming to the United States, and they don't want to adopt the culture, but instead bring their culture, bring their morals and values to the West and try to make America adapt to them. But that is not how the founding fathers intended for this country to run. And that's why you are seeing all of these rioters waving foreign flags, any foreign flag on our country. And to be quite honest with you, this is why Donald Trump won with flying colors last year, because Americans are so tired of every single foreign country being put ahead of us, foreign individuals being put ahead of us. And it's hilarious too, Jack, just to kind of get back to New York here a little bit. Socialism has already been in place in New York, right? For a certain class of people, illegal immigrants have essentially been the test case for socialism up there. And you know what happened? The average New Yorker absolutely despised having to pay tens of billions of their hard-earned dollars to house, feed, give medical care to illegal immigrants who didn't have to pay into the system at all. So it's just really interesting to see what's going to happen come November. I hope New York learned their lesson. Perhaps, the immigration crisis, something good that will come out of it is New Yorkers being awake to the realities of what this type of system would look like in place. But yeah, getting back to what I was saying about the founding fathers too, assimilation is so key, and it's something that has been completely disregarded, which is why there is no unity in our country right now, because you have so many different cultures, opinions, morals, and values that are clashing right now, and it is the exact opposite of what our founding fathers intended for our country to be.
And it comes down to, as well, this idea that, when you mass import people from parts of the world, like the third world, who have a very different vision of what a country should be or what a government should be. And, there's this people are talking about, capitalism versus socialism, et cetera. And that is kind of like a 101 way of describing it, because we don't obviously have a pure capitalist system. But these are parts of the world where that is what the government exists to be. The government exists as a variety of handouts to the citizens. And this is why, by the way, those countries don't have any rich people, or if they do, it's like this ruling elite that doesn't really care about everybody else, because that's their view of government. And that's why when you import so many millions upon millions of people into your country, you will fundamentally change the policies of your country, and you'll get, I mean, look, we've already got one Ketanji Brown Jackson up on the Supreme Court. Could you imagine if we had 9?
Jack, okay, so with Ketanji Brown Jackson and her dissent, I couldn't tell what was real and what was fake, because this is how much of a DEI hire this woman is. I was absolutely floored watching this. And like you're talking about, too, the importation of all of these various people from these different cultures. I mean, we have multiple sitting members of Congress that were born abroad. And if you look at the majority of them, they have been a net negative for U.S. politics, for the American citizen. They have only, let's take a peek at Ilhan Omar. She's the best example, because she has openly advocated for the interests of Somalia whilst being a sitting U.S. Congresswoman. Look at Sri Thandar, who is from not the United States of America, okay? And he's trying to impeach the president of the United States that we, the American people, voted into office to mass deport all of the illegal immigrants that were let in by the last administration. You have a third of the district court judges in Washington, D.C. that are foreign-born that somehow get their fingers on, all of President Trump's most important cases. So we truly have foreign subversion in our country, and foreign entities that are currently serving in our government for some reason that are doing everything in their power to push back against the interests of the American people. And I, quite frankly, am tired of it, Jack.
Sav, epic rant. We gotta run. Happy 4th of July, Savannah Hernandez, our favorite Chamorro, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission to lay ashore.
America's Voice family.
Are you on Getter yet? No?
What are you waiting for?
It's free.
It's uncensored.
And it's where all the biggest voices in conservative media are speaking out.
Download the Getter app right now. It's totally free. This is America's Voice Live.
And welcome to America's Voice Live. I'm Steve Griffin.
The pulse of the people.
We need somebody that's going to hear the people's voice.
The truth the mainstream won't touch.
This guy is by definition a globalist.
And the stories that matter.
Rav's own Ben Bergquam.
Right up over this hill, we got a cartel. I see him.
Live.
Breaking news right now here on Real America's Voice.
Unfiltered.
These people are domestic terrorists.
And unapologetic.
We're here to take a stand for God and country. Does feel good, doesn't it?
America's Voice Live starts now.
Welcome to America's Voice Live. I'm Steve Garrett. It's Wednesday, the 2nd of July. Let's get into the day's top stories. As always, thank you for joining us here on Real America's Voice. We appreciate you spending time with us. The House of Representatives convened earlier today to vote on considering the bill. We're at 1A 212 to 211 vote. Debates on the bill took place after that procedural vote, and Democrats don't seem to be, well, they're not too happy about it. Fun, isn't it? I'll be discussing that with a couple of different members of Congress. You won't want to miss it. Coming up also, the Educational Choice for Children Act has often been mentioned within the big, beautiful bill, despite being in and out during amendments